The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alexander Harrington's penthouse office in downtown Chicago, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany desk. Alex, as he preferred to be called, sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the cream-colored envelope that had just arrived. The return address belonged to Isabella Morgan, his ex-fiancée. With trembling hands, Alex opened the envelope, though he already knew what he would find inside. The wedding invitation was printed on thick, textured paper, with gold foil lettering that caught the light. Isabella Morgan and Michael Bennett cordially invite you. The words seemed to mock him. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Harrington? Sarah Collins, his housekeeper of 5 years, stood at the office doorway with his morning coffee. Her practical black uniform and sensible shoes contrasted sharply with the modern luxury of his home office. Is everything all right? Alex looked up, his usually composed face showing signs of distress. At 42, he had built his tech company from the ground up, weathered countless business storms. But this felt like a punch to the gut. She's getting married. Isabella, is getting married to someone else. Sarah set the coffee down carefully on his desk, her movements measured and precise as always. At 35, she had worked in enough wealthy households to know when to speak and when to remain silent. This moment called for silence, but her eyes betrayed a hint of concern. 3 months, Alex continued, his voice hollow. It took her just 3 months to replace me with Michael Bennett. He spat out the name like it was poison. Do you know what makes it worse? He's my biggest competitor in the Chicago tech scene. The invitation trembled in his hands. 6 months ago, he and Isabella had been planning their own wedding. She had been the perfect match, beautiful, sophisticated, from an old money family that had welcomed him despite his self-made status. Or so he had thought. Perhaps some breakfast would help, sir? Sarah suggested gently. I could make those eggs Benedict you like. But Alex was lost in memories. The night Isabella had ended their engagement still played in his mind like a bad movie. I need someone more stable, Alex, she had said, her voice cool and detached. Someone who doesn't put work before everything else. Someone who knows how to live, not just succeed. The irony wasn't lost on him. Michael Bennett was every bit the workaholic Alex was, maybe more so. The difference? Bennett came from old money, with a family name that opened doors Alex had to break down. His phone buzzed. Another message from his sister Catherine. Have you seen it? Followed by 3 crying emojis. News traveled fast in Chicago's elite circles. Sarah remained in the doorway, her presence somehow comforting in its familiarity. She had been there through his engagement, watching silently as Isabella redecorated his penthouse, and later as he threw himself into work after the breakup. She had quietly restored order to his life when Isabella moved out, removing all traces of her presence without being asked. The wedding is in 6 weeks, Alex said, more to himself than to Sarah. At the Drake Hotel. Of course it would be at the Drake. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. She always said that's where Chicago's elite get married. Guess I wasn't elite enough for her. Sarah's eyes flickered with an emotion Alex couldn't quite place. Was it sympathy, or something else? Before he could ponder it further, his phone rang. It was his assistant, reminding him of a board meeting in an hour. I should go, Alex said, standing abruptly. Thank you for the coffee, Sarah. As he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, Sarah's voice stopped him. Mr. Harrington. He turned, surprised by the determination in her tone. Don't let her make you doubt yourself. You've built something remarkable, and that's worth more than any family name. Alex blinked, taken aback by the unexpected show of support. For a moment, he saw Sarah not as his housekeeper, but as a person, one who had been quietly observing and understanding him for years. Thank you, Sarah, he said softly, before heading out to face the day. As the elevator descended, Alex's mind raced. He couldn't let Isabella and Michael's wedding become the talk of Chicago's tech scene. He needed to show that he had moved on, that he was unaffected. But how? An idea began to form. A crazy, potentially disastrous idea. But as the elevator doors opened to the lobby, Alex made a decision. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Cancel my meetings for the afternoon. I need to have a conversation with Sarah." Sarah stood in Alex's living room later that evening, her hands clasped tightly in front of her uniform. The city lights twinkled through the windows, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere in the dimly lit space. Alex paced back and forth, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "Here's what I'm proposing, Sarah," he said, stopping to face her. "I want you to attend Isabella's wedding, as my date." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah blinked several times, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington, but I'm your housekeeper." "Exactly," Alex replied, his eyes lighting up with an intensity she'd never seen before. "That's what makes it perfect." Isabella always prided herself on her social status, her connections. What better way to show her that none of that matters than by bringing someone she would consider unexpected? Sarah moved to the kitchen, needing the familiar routine of making tea to process this bizarre situation. "Mr. Harrington, have you considered that this might reflect poorly on your business reputation?" "I've considered everything," he said, following her into the kitchen. "I'll make it worth your while. $20,000 for one day of your time, plus expenses for whatever you need, clothes, accessories, training." The teacup Sarah was holding clattered against its saucer. $20,000. "And a bonus if you can make Isabella believe we're genuinely involved." Alex leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. "I know it's asking a lot, Sarah, but you've been in my home for 5 years. You know more about me than most people." Sarah's mind raced. $20,000 was more than she made in 6 months. It could help her finally start the small catering business she'd been dreaming about. But the ethical implications troubled her. What exactly would this involve? 3 weeks of intensive preparation. You'll need to learn about wine, art, current events, everything that crowd talks about. We'll get you a complete makeover, new wardrobe, the works. Then, we attend the wedding together. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. "And what happens after the wedding?" "You go back to being my housekeeper, $20,000 richer, and I get the satisfaction of showing Isabella that happiness doesn't depend on social status." He accepted the tea with a nod of thanks. Sarah took a sip from her own cup, buying time to think. What if someone recognizes me? Different context, different presentation. People see what they expect to see, Sarah. Trust me on this. The truth of his words stung slightly. But Sarah knew he was right. She had been invisible to them, part of the background like the expensive furniture and art pieces. "I have conditions," she said finally, turning back to face him. "First, no one can ever know the truth, not just for your reputation, but for mine as well. Second, I want the money in writing, as a contract. And third," she took a deep breath, "I want you to introduce me to some of your restaurant industry contacts afterward. If I'm playing a restaurateur, I might as well make some real connections for my future." Alex's face broke into a genuine smile, the first she'd seen since the invitation arrived. "Deal," he said, extending his hand. As Sarah shook it, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just agreed to something that would change her life forever. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. Just then, Alex's phone rang. It was Catherine, his sister. He answered, putting it on speaker. "Alex, have you lost your mind?" Catherine's voice filled the kitchen. "I just heard from Mom that you're bringing a date to Isabella's wedding. Please tell me you're not doing something stupid." Alex and Sarah exchanged a look. "Don't worry, Kathy," Alex said smoothly. "I know exactly what I'm doing." As he hung up, Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Does your sister always get involved in your personal life?" Alex sighed. "Catherine means well, but she can be overprotective. Ever since our parents died, she's taken it upon herself to look out for me." Sarah nodded, realizing there was much about Alex's life she didn't know, despite years of working in his home. This plan, as crazy as it was, might give her a chance to understand the man behind the successful tech mogul facade. "We should start planning," Alex said, pulling out his tablet. "We have a lot of work to do in the next 3 weeks." As they began to outline their strategy, Neither Alex nor Sarah realized that they were embarking on a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. The next morning, Sarah stood in front of the floor-length mirror in her small apartment, scrutinizing her reflection. Her practical bob haircut and minimal makeup had served her well in her role as a housekeeper, but now they seemed woefully inadequate for the task ahead. A knock at the door startled her out of her reverie. She opened it to find Alex standing there, looking slightly out of place in the modest hallway of her building. "Ready for day one?" he asked, a mix of excitement and nervousness in his voice. Sarah nodded, grabbing her purse. "As ready as I'll ever be." Their first stop was a high-end salon on Michigan Avenue. As Sarah settled into the chair, the stylist, Marco, circled her with a critical eye. "We'll start with a rich chestnut color to bring out the warmth in your skin," Marco declared. "Then, some long layers to soften your features. Trust me, darling, when I'm done, you'll look like you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth." As Marco worked his magic, Alex sat nearby, engrossed in his tablet. "I've arranged for us to meet with a personal shopper at Neiman Marcus this afternoon," he said, not looking up. "Then we have an appointment with an etiquette coach tomorrow morning." Sarah watched in the mirror as her transformation began. As her hair took on a glossy new hue and style, she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Alex," she said softly, causing him to look up. "Are you sure about this? It's not too late to back out." Alex's eyes met hers in the mirror, and for a moment, Sarah saw a vulnerability there that surprised her. "I'm sure," he said firmly. "But if you want to change your mind, I understand." Sarah shook her head, sending her newly styled hair swinging. "No, I'm in. We had a deal." The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of designer clothes, shoes, and accessories. By the time they returned to Alex's penthouse that evening, Sarah felt like she had stepped into someone else's life. "Tomorrow we start on etiquette and current events," Alex said as they reviewed their schedule. "It's going to be intense, but I think you're up for it." Sarah nodded, suppressing a yawn. As she turned to leave, Alex called out, "Sarah?" She paused at the door. "Thank you for doing this. I know it's a lot to ask." For a moment, the facade dropped, and Sarah saw not her employer or the tech mogul, but just a man. One who had been hurt and was trying to protect himself the only way he knew how. "You're welcome, Alex," she said softly, before heading home to her apartment, her mind spinning with the events of the day. The next 3 weeks were a crash course in high society living. Sarah's days were filled with lessons on everything from wine tasting to art appreciation, from current events to the intricate web of Chicago's social relationships. One afternoon, as they practiced ballroom dancing in Alex's living room, Sarah stumbled, stepping on Alex's foot for the third time. "I'm sorry," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "I'm never going to get this right." Alex surprised her by laughing. "You're doing fine," he said, his hand warm on her waist as he guided her through the steps. "Besides, Isabella was never much of a dancer either. Just relax and follow my lead." As they moved across the floor, Sarah found herself hyper-aware of Alex's proximity. The scent of his cologne, the strength in his arms as he led her. It was all suddenly, acutely present. She stumbled again, this time out of distraction rather than lack of skill. "Everything okay?" Alex asked, concern in his eyes. Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. What was wrong with her? This was a business arrangement. Nothing more. She couldn't afford to let her emotions get involved. Their lessons weren't limited to the penthouse. Alex took her to art galleries, high-end restaurants, and exclusive social clubs, always under the guise of business meetings to avoid suspicion. Sarah absorbed it all, her natural intelligence and curiosity making her a quick study. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. One evening, after a particularly grueling session on the finer points of caviar appreciation, Sarah's frustration boiled over. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed, pushing away the plate of expensive fish eggs. "Who cares about the difference between Ossetra and Beluga? This isn't me, Alex. I don't belong in this world." Alex set down his own plate, his expression serious. "Sarah, look at me," he said gently. When she met his eyes, he continued, You belong wherever you choose to belong. This world, with all its rules and pretensions, it's not about worthiness. It's about confidence. And you, Sarah Collins, are one of the most capable, intelligent women I've ever met. You can do this. His words, spoken with such conviction, stirred something in Sarah. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Okay," she said, picking up her fork again. "Tell me more about this etc." As the weeks progressed, Sarah found herself changing in ways she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the designer clothes or the new hairstyle. There was a confidence growing within her, a sense of possibility that she had never allowed herself to feel before. One night, as they were reviewing their cover story over a late dinner, Alex asked, "So, tell me about this restaurant you dream of opening." Sarah hesitated, unused to sharing her personal aspirations, but something in Alex's encouraging smile made her open up. "It would be a place that bridges the gap between fine dining and comfort food," she began, her eyes lighting up as she described her vision. "A place where people could feel sophisticated, but also at home, where the food tells a story." As she spoke, Alex watched her with growing admiration. This was a side of Sarah he had never seen before. Passionate, articulate, full of dreams and ambitions. He found himself wondering how he had never noticed it in all the years she had worked for him. The night before the wedding, they did one final run-through of their story. As Sarah recited the details of their fake first meeting and subsequent dates, she realized with a start that somewhere along the line between pretense and reality had begun to blur. "Alex," she said suddenly, interrupting their rehearsal. "What happens after the wedding? After all of this is over?" Alex looked at her, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "I don't know," he admitted. "I guess we go back to our normal lives, but Sarah..." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm grateful. These past weeks, seeing you transform, it's been inspiring." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, but before she could respond, Alex's phone buzzed with a message from his sister Catherine. "Just checking you're not doing anything stupid tomorrow," it read. The moment broken, Alex sighed. "We should get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." As Sarah gathered her things to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that regardless of what happened at the wedding, her life had already changed irrevocably. The woman who would walk into the Drake Hotel tomorrow was not the same one who had agreed to this plan 3 weeks ago. The question was, who exactly had she become? The morning of Isabella and Michael's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect September day in Chicago. Sarah stood in front of her mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at her. The emerald green Ralph Lauren dress hugged her curves perfectly, her chestnut hair styled in elegant waves, as she fastened the delicate diamond earrings Alex had insisted she wear, a gift from his mother. Sarah took a deep breath to steady her nerves. A knock at the door announced Alex's arrival. When she opened it, they both froze, taking in each other's appearance. Alex looked dashing in his tailored tuxedo, his usually tousled hair neatly combed. "You look," Alex began, his eyes wide. "So do you," Sarah replied, a blush creeping up her cheeks. The ride to the Drake Hotel was filled with a tense silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts. As they pulled up to the grand entrance, Sarah felt a moment of panic. "Alex, I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. Alex took her hand, his touch sending a jolt through her. "You can," he said firmly. "We can, together." They made their entrance into the Gold Coast room, where the ceremony was to take place. Heads turned as they walked in, whispers following in their wake. Sarah recognized faces from magazine covers and news reports. Chicago's elite all gathered to witness the society wedding of the year. "Alexander!" A woman's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. Catherine Harrington Mills, Alex's sister, approached them with a mixture of surprise and concern on her face. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Hello, Kathy," Alex said smoothly. "You remember Sarah Collins?" Catherine's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly as she took in Sarah's transformation. Sarah, of course. You look different. It's lovely to see you again, Mrs. Harrington Mills, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. That Valentino suits you perfectly. Catherine's expression shifted from surprise to intrigue. Thank you. I didn't realize you and my brother were. Recent development, Alex cut in. Shall we find our seats? As they made their way to their assigned table, Sarah felt the weight of curious stares following them. She caught snippets of whispered conversations. Is that Alex Harrington's new girlfriend? She looks familiar. Wasn't she at the tech gala last month? I heard she's opening a new restaurant in River North. Sarah took her seat, remembering Mrs. Chen's advice about posture and poise. She could do this. She had to do this. The ceremony began, and Isabella appeared at the back of the room, a vision in white. As she glided down the aisle on her father's arm, Sarah felt Alex tense beside her. Without thinking, she reached for his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Alex looked at her, gratitude and something else, something deeper, in his eyes. Throughout the ceremony, Sarah was acutely aware of Isabella's gaze drifting towards their table. As the newlyweds made their way back down the aisle, Isabella's eyes locked with Sarah's for a moment. There was a flicker of recognition, quickly replaced by confusion, and then, was that jealousy? As the guests moved to the reception area, Alex leaned close to Sarah's ear. You're doing wonderfully, he whispered. But the real test is about to begin. Sarah took a deep breath, smoothing her dress as she stood. The cocktail hour would mean mingling, small talk, and inevitable questions about her relationship with Alex. They had rehearsed every possible scenario, but standing here now, surrounded by the cream of Chicago society, their carefully constructed story felt fragile as spun sugar. Alex! A deep voice called out. They turned to see Michael Bennett himself approaching, his new bride beside him. Isabella's eyes were fixed on Sarah, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Congratulations, Alex said smoothly, his arm sliding around Sarah's waist. The gesture, meant to be protective, sent a shiver down her spine. Sarah, darling, shall we offer our best wishes to the happy couple? As they moved forward to greet the newlyweds, Sarah silently prayed that their deception would hold. Little did she know, the evening was about to take several unexpected turns that would test not only their plan, but also their growing feelings for each other. The reception was in full swing, the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel alive with music, laughter, and the clink of champagne glasses. Sarah stood at the edge of the dance floor, observing the scene with a mixture of awe and trepidation. She had just finished a conversation with a prominent art dealer, successfully navigating a discussion about the latest exhibit at the Art Institute without raising suspicion. You're a natural. Alex's voice came from behind her, warm and approving. He handed her a fresh glass of champagne, his fingers brushing hers in a way that seemed more than accidental. Thanks to your coaching, Sarah replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at his touch. Though I have to admit, I'm starting to enjoy some of this. The art, the music. It's not all pretension. Alex's eyes softened. You belong here, Sarah. More than many of these people born into it. Before Sarah could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Isabella, resplendent in her wedding gown. Alex, darling, she said, her voice dripping with honey. I'm so glad you could make it. And this must be your girlfriend. Sarah Collins, Sarah introduced herself, extending her hand. Congratulations on your wedding. The ceremony was beautiful. Isabella's eyes narrowed slightly as she shook Sarah's hand. Thank you. You know, you look awfully familiar. Have we met before? Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her composure. I don't believe so, though I did attend the symphony fundraiser last month. Perhaps there? Possibly, Isabella mused, her gaze scrutinizing. And what is it you do, Sarah? I'm a restaurant consultant, Sarah replied, falling back on their prepared story. Currently working on opening my own place in River North. How fascinating, Isabella said, though her tone suggested anything but genuine interest. You must tell me all about it. Alex, you don't mind if I borrow your date for a moment, do you? Before Alex could protest, Isabella had linked her arm through Sarah's, steering her away from the crowd. Sarah glanced back at Alex, seeing worry etched on his face. Now then, Isabella said once they were relatively alone, let's dispense with the pleasantries. Who are you really? Sarah Collins? Sarah's mouth went dry. I'm not sure what you mean. Isabella's laugh was sharp and humorless. Please. I may not have paid much attention to the help when I was with Alex, but I'm not blind. You worked for him, didn't you? His housekeeper, if I'm not mistaken. For a moment, Sarah considered continuing the lie. But something in Isabella's eyes, a mixture of triumph and genuine hurt, made her reconsider. You're right, she admitted quietly. I was Alex's housekeeper. Was? Isabella raised an eyebrow. It's complicated, Sarah said, choosing her words carefully. Things have changed. Feelings have changed. Isabella studied her for a long moment. You're in love with him, she stated. Not a question, but a realization. Sarah felt the truth of it wash over her. She was in love with Alex. Somewhere between the dance lessons and the quiet conversations, between his encouragement and the way he truly saw her, she had fallen for him. Yes. I think I am. To her surprise, Isabella's expression softened slightly. You know, when I first saw you tonight, I was furious. I thought Alex had brought you to humiliate me, to prove some point about social status not mattering. But watching you together, she shook her head. He never looked at me the way he looks at you. Before Sarah could respond, Alex appeared at her side, concern evident on his face. Is everything all right? He asked, his eyes darting between the two women. Isabella smiled, a genuine smile this time. Everything's fine, Alex. In fact, I think things are exactly as they should be. She turned to Sarah. Take care of him. He's not as tough as he pretends to be. With that, Isabella glided away, leaving Alex and Sarah staring at each other in stunned silence. What just happened? Alex asked. Sarah took a deep breath. She knows, Alex, about who I really am, and about how I feel about you. Alex's eyes widened. How you feel about me? I think I'm in love with you, Sarah said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. And I think maybe you might feel something for me too. But if I'm wrong, if this is still just about making Isabella jealous, then tell me now before. Her words were cut off as Alex pulled her close, capturing her lips in a kiss that sent shockwaves through her entire body. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, the world around them had faded away. The orchestra, the glittering crowd, even Isabella and Michael. None of it mattered. I love you too, Alex said softly. I think I have for a long time, but I was too blind to see it. You've always been there, Sarah, seeing the real me beneath all of this. He gestured vaguely at their surroundings. As they stood there, lost in their newfound realization, neither of them noticed Catherine watching from across the room, a knowing smile playing on her lips. The evening was far from over, and there were still challenges to face. But in that moment, Sarah and Alex knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. No more pretending. No more roles. Just them. And the promise of a future neither had dared to imagine before tonight. The weeks following Isabella and Michael's wedding were a whirlwind of change for Sarah and Alex. Their relationship, born from an elaborate ruse, blossomed into something real and profound. However, the transition wasn't without its challenges. One crisp October morning, Sarah stood in Alex's kitchen, no longer as his housekeeper, but as his partner. She was attempting to make breakfast, a task that had once been routine but now felt strangely unfamiliar. Everything okay in here? Alex asked, entering the kitchen in his pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. Sarah turned from the stove, a rueful smile on her face. I think I've forgotten how to make eggs Benedict. Isn't that ironic? Alex came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Maybe it's time for new traditions, he murmured into her hair. How about we go out for brunch instead? As they sat in a cozy cafe in Lincoln Park, Sarah couldn't help but notice the curious glances from other patrons. News of their relationship had spread quickly through Chicago's social circles, and they were now a subject of intense speculation. Does it bother you? Sarah asked, nodding towards a couple who were not so subtly watching them. All the attention, the gossip. Alex reached across the table, taking her hand. The only thing that matters to me is that we're together. Let them talk. Despite Alex's reassurances, Sarah found herself grappling with insecurities. The world of tech moguls and social elites was still foreign to her, and she often felt out of place at the galas and charity events that were now a regular part of her life. One evening, as they prepared for a tech industry dinner, Sarah's frustration boiled over. I don't know if I can do this, Alex, she said, struggling with the clasp of an expensive necklace. I'm not cut out for this world. I'm just a housekeeper playing dress-up. Alex crossed the room, gently taking the necklace from her hands. As he fastened it around her neck, he met her eyes in the mirror. You are so much more than that, Sarah. You're brilliant, kind, and stronger than you know. This world doesn't define you. You define yourself. His words, spoken with such conviction, bolstered her confidence. But Sarah knew she needed to find her own path, one that aligned with her dreams and values. Meanwhile, Alex faced challenges of his own. Some of his business associates questioned his judgment, wondering if his relationship with Sarah was affecting his focus on the company. In board meetings, he found himself having to assert his authority more forcefully than ever before. Through it all, Sarah stood by him, offering support and a fresh perspective. Her practical nature and genuine insights proved invaluable, both in his personal life and, increasingly, in his business decisions. As autumn deepened into winter, Sarah made a decision. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in Alex's penthouse, she turned to him with determination in her eyes. I want to open my restaurant, she said. Not with your money or your connections. I want to do it on my own terms. Alex studied her for a moment, then broke into a proud smile. I think that's a wonderful idea. What can I do to support you? As your partner, not your investor. Sarah's heart swelled with love and gratitude. Just believe in me, she said softly. That's all I need. And so, as the first snow fell over Chicago, Sarah began the arduous process of making her dream a reality. She scouted locations, developed a business plan, and started reaching out to potential investors. The work was challenging, often frustrating, but deeply fulfilling. Alex watched her transformation with a mixture of pride and awe. The woman he had once seen as just his efficient housekeeper was revealing depths of determination and creativity he had never imagined. Their relationship deepened as they navigated this new phase together. They learned to balance their individual ambitions with their life as a couple, supporting each other's dreams while nurturing their connection. As the year drew to a close, Sarah and Alex found themselves back at the little cafe in Lincoln Park, where they had brunched months earlier. This time, no one gave them a second glance. They were just another couple enjoying a meal together. You know, Alex said, a mischievous glint in his eye. I never did pay you that $20,000 for attending Isabella's wedding with me. Sarah laughed, the sound light and carefree. How about you invested in my restaurant instead? As a silent partner, of course. Alex raised his coffee cup in a toast. To new beginnings, he said softly. To love that transforms us, Sarah added, clinking her cup against his. As they sat there, planning their future and reflecting on the unexpected journey that had brought them together, both Sarah and Alex felt a sense of contentment they had never known before. The road ahead might be uncertain, but they were ready to face it, together. Spring arrived in Chicago, bringing with it new challenges and opportunities for Sarah and Alex. Sarah's restaurant, which she had decided to name Metamorphosis, was slowly taking shape in a former art gallery space in River North. One sunny April morning, Sarah stood in the dusty, half-renovated space, surveying the work that still needed to be done. The sound of power tools and the smell of fresh paint filled the air. "Miss Collins," a voice called out. Sarah turned to see Marco, her newly hired chef, approaching with a concerned look. "We have a problem with the kitchen equipment delivery. It's been delayed by 2 weeks." Sarah felt a knot of anxiety form in her stomach. The delay could push back their opening date, which would mean more costs and potential loss of buzz. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that this was exactly the kind of challenge she had wanted to face on her own. "Okay," she said, her mind already racing with potential solutions. "Let's see what we can do to work around this. Maybe we can rent some equipment for the first few weeks." As she and Marco brainstormed ideas, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Alex. "Good luck with the health inspection today. You've got this." His unwavering support brought a smile to her face, giving her the boost of confidence she needed to tackle the day's challenges. Meanwhile, Alex was facing his own set of obstacles. His company was on the verge of a major breakthrough in AI technology, but a last-minute bug in the software threatened to derail the project. As he sat in his office, surrounded by anxious developers and impatient investors, he found himself wishing for Sarah's calming presence. Just then, his phone chimed with a message from her. "Remember to eat lunch. You can't solve problems on an empty stomach. Love you." The simple message grounded him, reminding him of what truly mattered. With renewed focus, he dove back into problem-solving mode. As weeks passed, both Sarah and Alex found themselves tested in ways they hadn't anticipated. The demands of their individual pursuits often left them with little time for each other. Date nights were postponed, calls went to voicemail, and tensions occasionally flared. One evening, after another canceled dinner plan, Sarah arrived at Alex's penthouse to find him still hunched over his laptop, deep in work mode. "Alex," she said, unable to keep the frustration from her voice, "we need to talk." He looked up, the dark circles under his eyes testament to his exhaustion. "Sarah, I'm sorry. This project is just—" "I know," she interrupted, softening her tone. "I know how important it is, but we're important too. We can't let our relationship become collateral damage to our ambitions." Alex pushed away from his desk, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "You're right," he said, the weariness evident in his voice. "I don't want to lose us in the midst of all this." They spent the next hour talking openly about their fears, their dreams, and their commitment to each other. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was a necessary one. By the end, they had reached a new understanding, a promise to prioritize their relationship even as they pursued their individual goals. As summer approached, both Sarah and Alex found themselves reaching critical milestones. Metamorphosis was nearly ready for its soft opening, and Alex's AI project was entering its final testing phase. The night before the restaurant's friends and family preview, Sarah stood in the completed space, taking in every detail. The warm lighting, the carefully curated art on the walls, the gleaming open kitchen. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. "It's beautiful." Alex's voice came from behind her. She turned to see him standing in the doorway, a bouquet of flowers in his hand. "Just like its creator." Sarah felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes as she accepted the flowers. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. Alex shook his head, a proud smile on his face. "You did this, Sarah. All of it. I just had the privilege of watching you soar." As they stood there, surrounded by the physical manifestation of Sarah's dream, they both felt the weight of how far they had come. From employer and employee to partners in every sense of the word, their journey had been unexpected, challenging, and utterly transformative. The next evening, as Metamorphosis welcomed its first guests, Sarah caught Alex's eye across the busy dining room. In that moment, amid the clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation, they shared a silent acknowledgement of their love and the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. Their story was far from over, but whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger for the obstacles they had overcome and excited for the future they would build, side by side. The Chicago skyline glittered in the distance as Sarah and Alex stood on the rooftop terrace of Metamorphosis, glasses of champagne in hand. It was the restaurant's one-year anniversary, and the celebration was in full swing in the dining room below. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Sarah asked, leaning into Alex's side. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "In some ways, it feels like yesterday. In others, like a lifetime." The past year had been one of tremendous growth for both of them. Metamorphosis had become one of the hottest restaurants in Chicago, earning rave reviews and a loyal clientele. Sarah had proven herself not just as a visionary chef, but as a savvy businesswoman, navigating the challenges of the industry with grace and determination. Alex's AI project had launched successfully, catapulting his company to new heights in the tech world. But more importantly, he had learned to balance his ambition with his personal life, making time for Sarah and their relationship even amidst the demands of his career. "You know," Sarah said, a mischievous glint in her eye, "Isabella and Michael are here tonight. They asked for a table last week." Alex raised an eyebrow. "And how do you feel about that?" Sarah shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "Honestly, grateful. If it wasn't for their wedding, who knows if we would have ever realized what was right in front of us all along." Alex nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We've come a long way from pretending to be in love." "We certainly have," Sarah agreed. She turned to face him fully, her eyes shining with emotion. "Alex, there's something I need to tell you." He looked at her quizzically. "What is it?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, Alex stood frozen, processing her words. Then, a wide grin spread across his face. He pulled Sarah into a tight embrace, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "We're having a baby?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder and joy. Sarah laughed, nodding as happy tears spilled down her cheeks. "We're having a baby." As they stood there on the rooftop, the city spread out before them, and their future stretching bright and full of promise. Sarah and Alex knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. Their love story, born from an elaborate deception, had blossomed into something real, deep, and lasting. It was a testament to the power of seeing beyond appearances, of taking risks, and of allowing oneself to be transformed by love. As the sounds of the party drifted up from below, Sarah and Alex shared a tender kiss, sealing their commitment to each other and to the beautiful, unexpected life they had built together. In that moment, under the starlit Chicago sky, they were no longer the tech mogul and the housekeeper, no longer pretending or playing roles. They were simply Sarah and Alex, partners, lovers, and soon-to-be parents, ready to face whatever challenges and joys the future might bring, hand in hand. What did you think of the story? Please leave a comment with your opinion. 2 buttons will appear next to it, one to subscribe, if you haven't already, and another to watch other exciting stories. Make your choice. Thanks for watching this far. See you soon.